Hello, my name is Jeremy Barnes, and today I'm going to do a review for Daredevil Born Again Season 1. After I'm finished with the non spoiler part, I'm going to go fully in depth with some spoiler thoughts, but I'm going to try to keep it as brief as I can, an hour or less, hopefully, but we'll see how it goes. So, I'm going to start off with my overall thoughts about the show, which is that it is a good show with some really solid moments, but in my opinion, never reaches the quality of any season of the original Netflix series. Um, what I say that, or what I would say that the show does really well is that it's a courtroom procedural in the beginning, which was cool while it lasted, but like I think at a certain point it kind of gets over that, or like it doesn't really want to focus on that for the rest of it, which I think kind of makes sense for the story, and I think it's the reason why the previous Netflix show was never fully just a courtroom procedural. But I would say that this show does make an attempt at that more than the original series did, and I liked when they were doing those episodes. But I think overall, I still do prefer where it was kind of going near the end, except for like some missteps that they had. Um, and I liked that kind of structure in the original Netflix series, where it's kind of more focused on the superhero aspects with some of that everyday stuff sprinkled in. Um, because I'm a huge fan of Batman, and Batman is Batman. He's not Bruce Wayne, who then suits up as Batman. He's Batman who puts his face of being Bruce Wayne, and that's his actual mask. So I kind of like characters who are like that, and I would definitely, I think, put Matt Murdock in that category. He is Daredevil, at least from like what I've seen of him, because I haven't read comic books or anything, so maybe the comic books do have more of him being that like kind of lawyer. But I've only seen the Ben Affleck movie and then the entire Netflix run of Daredevil, and then now this, and from those previous incarnations before Born Again, that is kind of the focus where it's Daredevil, and we don't see that many court cases and stuff. So I like that Daredevil. Um, and I did like his lawyering here. The only thing about it that was kind of missing for me, I'll talk about in the spoiler section. But it was really strong while he was doing it, and it was a huge improvement over the lawyer stuff in the She-Hulk series, which was a kind of similar structure to what this started out as. Um, but the lawyer scenes were just like on a whole different level in terms of the writing of it. It was a lot stronger. So that was a cool addition, I think, to this season. And then some people might disagree with me on this part, but for me personally, I also don't think that Born Again even reaches the quality of the top three Disney Plus series from Marvel. But I do think it has potential, and I'm still really excited about season two. And if you're curious, I'll briefly tell you what my top three shows are, um, in no particular order. Um, but I would say for sure that Moon Knight is better than this. Loki, I'm not sure. I think it could be argued. And then WandaVision is my third favorite. I won't really compare the quality of WandaVision to Daredevil Born Again because they're like completely different types of shows. But just in terms of my personal ranking, I think I like WandaVision overall as a show more than Daredevil Born Again. But like I said, you can't really compare those two in my opinion, so don't argue about it with me. You can argue about the other two though if you want. But that's beside the point. The first kind of section I'm going to talk about is the story, and I would say that this story of Born Again mostly focuses on the rise of power for Wilson Fisk within politics. And I would say overall, that journey was kind of interesting to watch, but honestly, I didn't really, I wasn't super invested in it until the very end, pretty much. And then Matt's journey, obviously, because this is called Daredevil, is him accepting a tragedy and realizing that there are benefits to both parts of his life. Whereas before and in this show, he always kind of has this battle between his two halves, Matt Murdock and Daredevil. So that kind of ties to my point in the beginning, where he's kind of similar to Batman in that sense. And that's kind of where the lawyer procedural, courtroom procedural stuff comes in, because a lot of this is just Matt Murdock. I would say actually most of the show is Matt Murdock, and Daredevil isn't like truly born again until like pretty much close to the end of it. But season two, I expect to see a lot more Daredevil. So if you were kind of wanting more of that stuff, I think you definitely have to wait for that. Um, and Matt has kind of like focused on his Matt Murdock side before in the Defenders series, but he kind of quickly got out of it. I think maybe halfway through that show out of 8 episodes, maybe before that, I'm not really sure. But even when he didn't fully suit up again in that show, he was basically doing Daredevil stuff, even as Matt Murdock. So this show definitely goes deeper into him focusing on Matt Murdock. So that was a kind of a cool new flavor that we got to see that we never really delved into as much before. So I did like that. But I would say overall, this story focused more on the villain Wilson Fisk than it did on Matt, and it was more Wilson Fisk's journey. Like that was the focus, which is kind of similar. Not, I mean, like interesting now that I think about it because it's similar to another Marvel project that came out this year, Captain America: Brave New World. But me personally, I think that this project did a better job with what it was doing than Brave New World did. Whereas like here, I mean, obviously it has more time being a show. It does have more time to spotlight the like titular character who's supposed to be the main character of the movie, at Murdoch. Even though Wilson Fisk was, in my opinion, the actually primary protagonist of it in a lot of ways. Born Again did a similar thing with Captain America, Sam Wilson, and Thaddeus Ross, Red Hulk, where, in my opinion, that story was more focused on Red Hulk than it was Captain America. But I didn't feel the same sense of Captain America. It didn't really get to shine. Whereas here, I do think Matt Murdock and Daredevil did get to shine. I just don't think his journey was as kind of prevalent in the story as Wilson Fisk's was. And another similarity between those two projects is that it's about a political figure who has this like history of being, you could say, like a bad guy or somebody who's gotten in trouble or just had like extreme kind of methods that made them like or painted them in a bad light. Um, but Wilson Fisk actually got a bigger treatment of kind of having a statement within politics than Thaddeus Ross did, which is what I was expecting from Brave New World, and we got more of that here with Wilson Fisk, kind of tying in like corruption into that, because you can see my Captain America review where I talk about Red Hulk. That was a little bit of a different situation, but this is not about that movie, so I'm gonna get back to Daredevil now. Um, and I would say maybe because of the story, this is probably my least favorite season of Daredevil because the story wasn't as strong as it has been in any of the other seasons, in my opinion. But I think the setup does pose kind of a route for season two to actually be really exciting. So I'm hoping they do stick the landing with that. But the next section I'm going to talk about is the characters. And since this is still a Daredevil show, I'm going to start with Matt Murdock, Daredevil. Um, I would say Matt Murdock in this season is a lot more controlled, and in my opinion, better than in season one overall as a character in terms of my enjoyment of him on screen. but not as good as his role in season 2 or 3 of the Netflix show. Um, and the way that I would describe his kind of arc in this season is he's like a kettle, like just waiting to explode. Um, and he gets closer and closer to that as things push him throughout the season, which is, a journey for him. But the whole time he's like trying to hold it back as much as he can, and in my opinion, he does a really good job at that, which kind of goes into that thing of him being very controlled. Whereas before, I don't think he was as like kind of holding himself back. He was I think maybe better at balancing his life in previous seasons, except for maybe season 3, where that one was kind of like a flip of this, or this is a flip of season 3, um, where in season 3 he was focused entirely on Daredevil stuff, even if he didn't suit up as Daredevil. That's what his kind of primary goal was, and then here it's primarily him being a lawyer. And then that just goes to say that Daredevil in this season is pretty much non-existent. He had like a couple of fight scenes, pretty much, and then that's kind of it. So don't expect like a lot of Daredevil. But I will say when he is there, it is pretty cool, and I do like his new costume, which is actually the other section that I forgot to mention. But I feel like there's not really that many costume characters in this season, so I guess it doesn't really need its own section. But the next character I'm going to talk about is Mayor Wilson Fisk slash Kingpin, because he does become mayor of New York City in this show. And his arc in this season, the way it starts, is really interesting and a little bit unexpected, where he's trying to keep himself calm and peaceful, and it's because he's in this new like very public position, and where he's in the spotlight of the public. So he's trying to like maintain himself and hold himself back in a similar way to Matt, which is kind of the main, I think, kind of focus or the draw of this show, where it does focus on Matt Murdock and Wilson Fisk, and it kind of shows them mirroring each other, and they have like um, similar arcs, I would say. Um, but for Fisk, the way that he behaves makes him seem weak, because every time we've seen him before, he's like, this vicious, like very strong, powerful figure or force. But because he's holding himself back here, I think the audience kind of underestimates him, and then the characters around him also underestimate him. But then obviously that also reaches a boiling point where he shows who he really is, and I'll go into that later. But I would say, even though the journey's similar, Kingpin is more willing to revert back to violence than Matt is, and when he does return to that, he is fucking brutal. So, um, if you were a fan of the violence or the way that it was portrayed in the Daredevil show before, I think Fisk will definitely hold that over for you, where we don't get to see much of that from Daredevil. And then a huge character this season, I think maybe her most important season, and maybe one where she has the most agency, is Vanessa Fisk, so Wilson's wife, who in this season begins kind of estranged from her husband, because we find out that it seems to me like they've been separated, not like legally separated from their marriage, but like literally like physically separated from each other for maybe up to 2 whole years, which is a long time to be away from your like marriage partner. um so that created a rift, and it's because of what happened in Hawkeye originally, which I think takes place at the end of 2024. And then this takes place in 2026 or 2027. I think it starts at the end of 2026, so that's where that 2 years would come in, but then it moves into the next year. Um, so at the end of Hawkeye, spoilers for that, Maya Lopez, who was like a protege of Wilson Fisk, shoots him in the eye, harming him, nearly killing him, but he somehow fucking survives. And then in the Echo series, which spin-offs from that with Maya, he's heals after I don't know how many months it is, maybe like just a few months, 3 months, maybe up to six, I'm not sure. But then in that show, he whatever happens with him and Maya, at the end they have a small confrontation, and she develops powers in that show where she does something to his mind where he's able to kind of see what traumatized him as a kid again and kind of re-experience that trauma. And I think that's kind of what kicks off his journey in this season of Daredevil, because he had to kind of look at his life and like figure out what he was gonna do next. And that whole time, I think from Hawkeye until now, he hadn't been interacting with Vanessa, which is crazy. But before that, I think he was, and they were working together within their criminal empire, which I believe Fisk had to restart after the events of Daredevil season three. Um, at whatever point he got out of jail, or prison, and we're it's not clear when that was, but at some point, I think during the blip, because we do see Maya Lopez interact with Kingpin during the blip, which is also when Daredevil faces her briefly in the year 2021, which would be 3 years, excuse me, after the blip, or after Thanos snapped his fingers. Um, but anyway, Vanessa, I would say, is the true primary antagonist of the season. Um, like opposite of Daredevil's protagonist, even though I said that Wilson Fisk is the protagonist. Um, I guess he wouldn't really be described as that, but in my mind, he's kind of like the main character of the season. Maybe not the protagonist, but the main character. Still an antagonist, but I would say even above him, Vanessa is the primary antagonist for season one of Daredevil Born Again. And I would say her schemes in this season make her just like seem very evil and very, very controlled, more so than Fisk, the way that he's holding himself back. Vanessa is like on a whole another level of control. She's very methodical, with her actions, and I think that's kind of what makes her seem evil to me. But there is obviously some humanity to her as well, and we do get to see that obviously. All of that stuff is really good. The next character that I'm going to talk about actually ties those two while they're going through this this kind of rift in the relationship is Dr. Heather Glenn, who starts off as Matt's love interest in the show. Um, she's a therapist. That's what she is. She becomes a couples therapist for Vanessa and Wilson. Um, and in my opinion, she actually was Matt's best love interest that we've seen in the show, um, or in the MCU in general. Um, but at a certain point, there's like a turning point where I think the characters start realizing, and then the audience, if they didn't already feel it, they start realizing, which was the case for me, because I liked their relationship before, but then at a certain point, you realize that the love is actually not there. It's kind of lacking, and obviously things are not going to work out if that's the case. Um, but she remains kind of a role going forward past this season, so I am curious to see what they're gonna do with her next. The next character I'm gonna talk about is Buck Cashman, who is Fisk's security aide, as the mayor, and in my opinion, he's kind of like the new Wesley from season one. which was Wilson Fisk's right hand man, and nobody has ever been able to kind of really replace him. But I think Buck probably comes closest to it. Um, but I would say that Felix Manning was also very important to Fisk in season three, but he never had that like direct personal relationship with Fisk, and I wouldn't say Buck does either, but it does seem a little bit closer than Felix Manning, who was like I think all business with Fisk. So, and I also think Buck is very like kind of charming in a similar way to Wesley, which is why he seems like the new Wesley. Just not as much. He's a little bit more handsome, but not as charming. And then the other person circling Wilson Fisk's kind of corner of the show is Daniel Blake, who's a young intern at his office as well while he's being the mayor. And this character gains credibility from his unwavering loyalty slash support for Wilson Fisk. Um, because beforehand he wasn't like in politics very much, but because of how much he just kind of got on board with Fisk's kind of plan for the city, he went out of his way to kind of get as many signatures to get him like on the like in the running for mayor, and obviously helping him win the mayorship, and then afterward being on his team to kind of help him enact his vision. um so he was a really cool character, and I think Michael Gandolfini is he did a really good job portraying the kind of young aspect, not too young, more like 20s young, where maybe he could still be kind of manipulated in some ways in terms of like his mind and like who he kind of latches onto for like I guess a role model, because I would describe Fisk as Daniel's role model, and like that's how Daniel sees him. Um, but also like really like excited, like he's excited to do the job. He's not jaded like maybe an older character would be. Um, all right, so the next character I'm gonna talk about is BB Urich, who in this season was like a barely there journalist and also the niece of Ben Urich from season one of the original Daredevil show. And I would say her use this season, she was mostly seen, quote unquote, seen because she wasn't actually in them, but her impact was mostly felt through video interviews of New Yorkers on her like video show, like kind of news show, called the BB Report. And those videos did do a good job of kind of having the city feel like a character in itself, and having everything that's happening with Matt Murdock and Wilson Fisk seem or like feel like it's having an effect on the actual city, which was really cool because we never got to really see that vibe from the original show. And one of those like human elements is something that we might have been missing in a lot of recent MCU projects, where we don't actually see the superheroes saving people. Um, and it seems like disconnected from the actual world of just the ordinary civilians. So that was a kind of cool way to bring that in a little bit. I'm expecting and hoping for that to actually be a bigger part of season two, because it was pretty much just in the BB report that we felt some of that stuff. Um, and then maybe a little bit with um, Fisk's kind of campaign and win for the mayor position. Um, but then we didn't really get to see any of that stuff beyond that. So I'm hoping in season two where that we see more of that there. And then the next character I'm going to talk about is another vigilante that appears in this season, slash hero, and that's Hector Ayala, the White Tiger, who's a new addition to the MCU. And in my opinion, he's probably the best character ever put to screen with such a short screen time that he has in this show, because he only appears in 2 episodes. But like those 2 episodes fucking hit. Like his character hit me, it impacted me to like a crazy level. And I don't think I've ever cared about a character who had like such a small role in the grand scheme of things, like I did his character. And that I think is largely due to the performance by Kamar de los Reyes, who sadly passed away before the show was released. I think he passed away in 2020. I actually don't know if it was, I think it was 2023, so 2 years ago. Um, Possibly earlier, I'm not sure, but I think I might be confusing him for somebody else who passed away in 2021. Um, but his performance was fucking amazing, and basically all else that I could say about him without spoiling anything is that he's just another vigilante who rises in the absence of Daredevil when Matt focuses on his lawyer side. And he's the pure good of the show because Matt and Fisk both have two sides to them where they kind of want to be good or be one way and like not really resort to their like darker halves where for Matt it's Daredevil, for Fisk it's obviously being the kingpin of crime. As mayor he wants to kind of be better. Hector is just all good, like there is no really two sides to him. Hector is White Tiger is Hector. It's not, there can't really be a divide. Um, and that also kind of plays into the story a little bit too. But I'll talk about that in the spoiler section. And then another character we see is his niece, Angela del Toro. Um, and she wishes to kind of follow in her uncle's footsteps and also be a hero. And the actress who played her also gave a great performance. I actually didn't know her name and I don't remember it from the top of my head, but I'll add it to the screen while I edit. Um, when I look it up later. She also didn't get too much to do in the show, but there is a lot of setup for her to be seen in the future, and I am excited to see more of her whenever that happens. Obviously, I think in season 2, but maybe even past that. We'll see. Muse is a serial killer who dresses up with a mask and who also is an artist, a street artist in New York at this time. And he, this is not really a spoiler, it could be considered a spoiler, but it's just pretty much his character. He's a serial killer who uses his victims' blood to create art, to paint. He mixes it with paint and he creates murals on the walls of the city, on the streets. Um, and his character is kind of a catalyst for both Matt Murdock and Wilson Fisk to return to their past roles as Daredevil and Kingpin, respectively. But he's more of a plot function than really a character in this season. And I was disappointed by that because I was kind of expecting him to be a really cool character, but he ends up not really being. Um, but he can be scary when he first appears, and I did like him in the beginning. I just feel like they didn't really do his character justice by the end of it. The next character I'm going to talk about is somebody else who works in Fisk's office, and her name is Sheila Rivera. She's his political aide who kind of teaches him how to navigate the political sphere, since that's something that's new to Fisk. But Sheila, I forget how they say her name. I think it's Sheila. She's actually from politics, so she knows that business more than anybody else on Fisk's team because that isn't what they kind of started out on. He kind of they just either volunteered in Daniel's case or came from some other line of work like Buck. Um, and in a way, she's kind of Fisk's handler because she's always holding him back from like just doing whatever he wants to do, and because there's these protocols you have to follow in politics, and she's the one that's like, no, you got to do this first, you got to do this. I'm not sure we could do that. She's the one kind of telling him all these things, and that's why I kind of describe her as that. um the next few characters, well, the next two characters are more in Matt's sphere. And the first one is Kirsten McDuffie, who is Matt's new business partner at a new law firm called Murdock and McDuffie. Um, she's hardly a character in this season. It's kind of more maybe like a setup for a character that we might see in season two, but I don't even know how much we'll see her in there either. But she could be cool, but they just didn't give her anything to do. And she's supposed to be like a really good lawyer like Matt and Foggy, but like we never get to see that. So I don't buy that because hasn't been proof of her being a good lawyer. Like we've seen Foggy be a great ass lawyer, and we've seen Matt be a great ass lawyer as well. Um, but Kirsten, we have not seen that yet, so I don't have much to say beyond that for her. Then there's this other character who was a former NYPD officer, who is no longer an officer and he just does private work. Um, and his name is Detective Cherry. And basically, the way I would describe him is he's Matt's Gordon type figure, Commissioner Gordon, kind of tying back to the Batman Daredevil comparison. But in my opinion, he's nowhere near as interesting as Gordon. Um, but that being said, I didn't mind him in the story, and I think he has a little bit more to do than Kirsten, but he's not any more interesting than her, in my opinion. And he kind of just does a job to advance the plot. Um, and when I get into the spoilers, I'll talk a little bit more about him and things maybe they could have done differently with Cherry's character. But the next character I'm going to talk about is Officer Powell, who is another NYPD officer who's currently serving, and he's the head of the corruption within the NYPD, at least in the show. Um, because we see that there's like a group of NYPD officers who some of them might interact, some of them might not, but they're all kind of like dirty. And this guy is probably the worst of the bunch. He's just an absolute asshole piece of shit, but you love to hate him in the show. So it's kind of a fun experience, at least for me, watching him, and it sometimes could even be shocking, but you just want this guy to lose every time you see him, and sometimes he does it, and it could be to some comedic effect, which is always fun to see. Um, there's another character who's in a similar boat, but he doesn't come into the picture until later on, and his name is Sergeant Cole North. And in my opinion, he is underused, and he's kind of a secondary antagonist um, in this season. And I had heard about his character from the comics because I think we had actually, or like there had been leaks about set photos from when this guy was filming. So I had seen him on the set, and I expected that he would have a bigger role because of those set photos and because of what I saw or found out about him from the comics. But in my opinion, they didn't really give him a good storyline, and I'm gonna talk more about him as well in the spoilers because his role is very spoilery. There's not really much to him beyond spoilers. So yeah, but I guess what I could say is that I feel like Powell and Cole North could have just been combined into one character, and it would have been a little bit more seamless. But like I said, I'll talk about more about it later. Um, the next four characters are returning characters from the Netflix series. Um, And the first that I'm gonna mention is Bullseye, Benjamin Poindexter, and he is also not in the season a lot, but he kind of kicks off the story. But he's sidelined after the first episode. Um, and for the whole rest of the season. But there is again more potential for him to have a bigger impact in season two. And the only reason why he's not in it as much is because he wasn't in the initial plan for the season when the original creators of the show were making it. Because Daredevil Born Again, at a certain point in filming, when the strikes were happening and other stuff in Hollywood, um, they like took a look at what they had filmed so far, and the like lead actors, Charlie Cox, who plays Matt Murdock, and Vincent D'Onofrio, who plays Wilson Fisk, were like, I don't know if where we're headed is the right direction to go. So the executives kind of agreed, and they're like, all right, well, maybe we need to kind of restructure this, and they brought new showrunners in to basically bring back some of the connective tissue from the previous Netflix show into the show, into Born Again, because originally they were kind of trying to separate themselves from it, and it was gonna be kind of like a soft reboot. But here it's more of, yes, a different show, but still kind of a season four of that Netflix show. It's a different show because of the feeling of it, and obviously I think the cinematography also is a big thing, but the characters and the storylines are carrying over from everything that happened before, and that's mostly from the new creators. So Bullseye wasn't gonna be in it, but when the new creators came on, they're like, well, Bullseye has to be in it because he was left kind of on a cliffhanger at the end of season three. And it's not like directly following that, but it does seem to be like Bullseye's first kind of major actions since that show when he does show up here, so it does kind of make sense within the timeline. Um, and again, I'll talk about him later in the spoiler section. Foggy Nelson, Foggy, Matt's partner before, um, is criminally underused in this season, and I don't know if you could really get around this without spoiling it, but I guess I'll try my best not to. But obviously, there's something that happens with Foggy that makes him not be as big of a character as he has been before. Um, and yeah, it just kind of sucked. Like he was barely in it at all. So that's all I'll say about that. Karen Page is in the show a little bit more than Foggy, and I feel like she had a great presence that pretty much bookends the season. She's only in episode one and episode nine, the finale. And she's the only anchor to Matt's previous life in this show. And that's kind of why her presence is very important. Because he's kind of living a lie in this season, and like at the end when she comes back, he kind of has to admit the truth to himself as well as to others for maybe the first time in this entire like time of his life where he's just solely devoted on being a lawyer. And there's a lot there that it was really good and that I want to talk about more later. And then the last character that I'm going to mention, and I think the last kind of big character that is worth mentioning, is Frank Castle, the Punisher. And he is in pretty much one episode as well, but he has one scene in another episode. But originally, I believe it was supposed to be. I mean, I don't know exactly the plan, but it seems, or there was something along the lines where that scene might have been a little bit closer to his role in the finale, which is the only episode he's really in. Maybe not in the same exact episode, but shortly before that. Where but they moved that scene into episode four, which is pretty much the middle of the season, and I do think that that where that scene takes place made sense and it worked. And that scene is actually, I think, the best scene in the entire season. The scene with Frank Castle. It's him and Matt, just them two talking in a room, and that scene is so emotionally driven, and it pretty much like, in a way, kind of sums up the season in a really, really, really tight, fascinating, interesting, and enjoyable on an entertainment level way. And that's why I would consider it the best scene. Um, we see more of the Punisher side of him in the finale, and that's when the only time he gets to do some action. And in my opinion, I don't know if other people would agree with me on this, but in my opinion, the Punisher side of him kind of sucked. For me, the Punisher depiction was a huge departure from his Punisher portrayal before in the Netflix shows, and not only Daredevil season one, but also in the Punisher series that John Bernthal had himself. Here, he seems very different, and it kind of seemed like a character, not full assassination, but it seemed out of character a little bit for him what he was doing in this show. Um, as always, though, he was brutal as the Punisher, and that's not what I'm talking about. It's just like, I'll go into it more in the spoiler section, but it's just like the way that he was doing things, or like who he was doing it to, I guess, that made me a little bit like uncomfortable. And maybe it's the creators trying to kind of change what they had done before in the Netflix series, where he Frank Castle was kind of heroic, but Punisher's not supposed to be a hero. So maybe that's why they portrayed him like this in this, because he's not supposed to be heroic, and he doesn't feel like that here. He does feel like just kind of a straight up bad guy for those actual Punisher scenes. Like when he has like this, he still has that softer side in that one on one scene with Matt Murdock. But when he's being the Punisher, he's actually being the Punisher, and that's where it just felt weird to me, because I thought we were gonna get the same character that I had seen and kind of fallen in love with before, but then we got something kind of different. So it just kind of threw me off. Um, but I'm curious to see where he goes in the future and to see how much of that is gonna play out, or how it's gonna play out. Like maybe it'll all work out later, but just right now, I didn't like personally what they did with him in the finale. Um, the next section I'm gonna talk about. Um, well, I guess I'll briefly talk about the costumes. The only real costumes in the season are Daredevil. I guess Muse as well. Um, but I guess I'll start with his costume. His costume, I think, was really good. It was it was looked very accurate to the source material. So that was cool, and I also liked the added element. I don't know if this was necessarily in the comics or not, but his costume was made out of canvas, which fits for him being an artist. So that was really cool, and it was stapled together because he's not a costume maker. He's an artist, but his art is not making clothing. So it was just a hobbled together outfit with some overalls, because he has his base in the subway lines. So he wears these like rubber boots to protect him from the currents and the railing on the train rails. Um, and then he just wears this beanie, which is kind of an artist thing to do, I think, wearing a beanie, especially a white artist. And he is a white character, a white male character. Um, Daredevil's costume in this, which was a new costume, I really like. I think overall, It seems like from some of the scenes they filmed pre-overhaul and then post-overhaul might have like had it might have fitted differently on Charlie Cox's body or his face at least the cowl, the mask. I think maybe the whole suit, but it's more noticeable in the face with the mask. Um, where sometimes it doesn't look as good, and I think that was in the pre-overhaul scenes where I think Charlie's face might have been a little bit bigger, or the mask might have like pressed his face, where his kind of cheeks were like kind of squishing outward. But in the overhaul scenes, it looks like pretty clean, where it's a really it looks like it's like fitted very well and maybe hopefully more comfortable for Charlie Cox as the actor wearing it. Um, and it's just a lot cleaner. Um, the red pops a lot more than the original Netflix costume did, and I think just the design of it itself is a lot cleaner. It still has some possibly like you would consider unnecessary pieces, and it's still lacking the logo, the Daredevil logo with the two D's, as you could see here in the comic book version, which kind of sucked because he should have it. He should have had it, in my opinion, as soon as he came into the proper MCU. In She-Hulk, it would have been cool to have just one big D on the yellow costume, um, and then here to get both Daredevil double D's on his chest, but he doesn't have it yet. But the rest of the costume looks good. I really like the texture of it, and they added some texture to the cowl itself, which was really cool. I don't know if I prefer that, but it does have a cool effect, where it makes it capture very well on film, especially in one scene, which I'll talk about in a later section. And then the only other character besides them two that has a costume. Oh shit! I keep forgetting about characters. Is I guess there's two characters. White Tiger's one. His costume isn't that cool. It's very like street costume, like kind of like a Arrowverse, CW type costume. But I like his mask. Like his mask looks really cool when he's putting it on in a straight on shot. But then in other shots, like when he's looking to the side, it kind of looks funny, and it kind of makes his head look like really long. But the basic design of it, I think, is pretty cool, and the costume could be better if it wasn't like designed in the way it was, where I think his pants and maybe part of his shirt is like camo, but it's all white camo, like gray, black, and maybe white. I don't know exactly if all those colors are there, but it's like grayscale, and I don't think it looks good. It fits for the character because he has a military background that is mentioned, but it just looks weird. Like it would have been better if he just bought some like white jogging pants, and like if you wanted to design it, do whatever, spray paint it or whatever you wanted to do with it, instead of wearing like this kind of do it yourself kind of cosplay type costume. Um, so his costume wasn't the best. And then the other character that I was gonna talk about before I remembered White Tiger is Bullseye. And Bullseye has a costume in the comics. Here, his costume is also like not really comic accurate. It's not there yet, but we do see kind of signs of him actually being Bullseye, having that actual moniker or title. I don't think they ever called him that in the Netflix show. Um, but the first time we hear it is actually from Frank Castle, and we do see the symbolism of a bullseye on him, which we only got an Easter egg nod at that in season 3 of Daredevil when Dex was a kid playing baseball. I don't know what his team name would have been, but his cap had a bullseye on it. Um, and that was all we got. Here, there's a little bit more incorporated into a costume for him, but it's on his gloves right here, not on his mask, which he has in the comics. But he does have a mask, and it's just basically like a ski mask where only the eyes have an opening for him to see through. And I thought I wasn't gonna like his costume, but in my opinion, it actually did work in the show. But I do hope to see a more accurate, like traditional costume in the future. Um, but that's all I'll say about that. Now the action, which is a huge thing in Daredevil and in comic book adaptations in general, I would say in this season is minimal, which is kind of surprising. And okay overall. But nowhere near the quality that the Netflix action had. And on the other note, I do think it's better than other Disney Plus shows from Marvel. But still probably not the best. Like I think I might prefer the action in the Falcon and the Winter Soldier over the action in this. But they're pretty close. Like the action is good when it happens, and it's also brutal when it happens. And it's very hard hitting, which does make it kind of worth it for it not being as big of an aspect, because when it does happen, you feel it, and did enjoy it. I do maybe wish there was more. I honestly don't regret it, but I do hope there's more in the second season because there wasn't as much in this season. And it makes sense because Daredevil wasn't part of it. It makes sense that there wouldn't have been as much action. But they still find excuses to get Matt Murdock into some scenarios, even when he's not suited up as Daredevil. So it was cool to see that, because we never got to see that much of that in the Netflix show. I think the most was probably in the season 3 episode where he's escaping the prison. Um, but and then some parkour stuff, but then that's pretty much it. Here we actually get at least like two straight up action scenes with him, just in his Matt Murdock kind of suit and tie. So that was kind of cool. Now the next section that I'm going to talk about are the themes of the show. The first one being vengeance, which is something that both Matt and Fisk deal with in some way, and I could talk more about that specifically in the spoiler section. Um, Another theme, I don't know how to put it into like one word or like category, but it's basically like that people change and that they can change for the better. Um, because Fisk tries to be better than he was before, and the reason for him doing that in this season is to get by in the public eye as the mayor, because he has to kind of be seen a certain way for him to really be welcomed and like supported by the people. And then Matt is 100% focused on lawyering. Even when things start to call for Daredevil, he still kind of pushes back against that and tries to do things through the system. Which, like the way that he sees it, Daredevil kind of represents the darkest part of himself, but Matt Murdock represents the lightest part of himself because he's doing things through the law and not against it. Um, and they both are like kind of really set on that being them now, but neither one of them fully thinks that the other one is going to stay within that lane. So they both expect the other to break at some point, and obviously when it does, it creates some interesting conflict and opportunities for the storytelling. Um, the next theme that I want to mention is the nature of people and their like duality, which kind of ties in with that previous theme. And the main kind of thesis of the season is that everybody has a darkness within them, and you can only mask aspects of who you are when it comes to that side of yourself, the dark side of yourself, or anything else that you might be trying to hide. But you cannot ever fully rid yourself of that side because that is who you are. That's part of who you are, and that's something that's true for both Matt Murdock as Daredevil and Wilson Fisk as Kingpin. Um, and then I would say the last kind of major theme of the season is corruption, just in general, and that applies to the institutions that we see in the show, which is obviously the political sphere and the mayor's office, the police, um, the law system, just in general, the legal system, judicial kind of government, um, and then um, corruption through power as Mayor Fisk becomes mayor and kind of starts creating like avenues for himself for his kind of vision for the future. He gets power, more power than he ever had before, and then also through that money, um, which we see through some of those other avenues as well. Um, with the police, we see the NYPD brutality, and that's obviously a part of corruption. And then within the politics, we see blackmail, and then certain politicians turning a blind eye to certain things for one reason or another. And then we also see the law and specifically the prison complex play into this a bit with one episode where it's like a smaller kind of legal storyline in that one episode after getting more of that in the first half of the season, with this one character called Leroy Bradford, where he's arrested just for stealing a box of candy. And he points out this like crazy but true statement that the government or yeah, I mean pretty much the government would spend more money to lock this dude up for a certain amount of time because of his past like offenses than they would to just give him the food or feed him when he's like starving out here and hungry. Um, and that like shows a major kind of flaw in the system in the institutions that we have. Um, and I think race for him in particular is a big factor in that because he was a black man. Well, he is a black man. Um, so there's that as well as like institutional racism, which it's only in it with him in this season. It doesn't really apply to anything else in the season as far as I can recall. But that was one aspect that is something true that the show did kind of touch on briefly. So I did think I needed to mention that. Um, Now I'm going to talk about the music, which in this season was very good, as I would say it always has been in the Daredevil show. Um, I would say that the theme here, though, is more prevalent than it was in the Netflix show. But at the same time, it could be actually as a detriment because sometimes the music kind of undercuts some scenes where like I feel like it seemed kind of random that it would kind of start out of nowhere. And I felt that at least twice, where I actually like noted that in my mind when it happened. I was like, that's kind of weird. Why is the music playing right here, or why is that music playing right here? Um, but overall, I enjoyed it. I liked it, and I liked that the theme kind of shows up more than beyond the kind of title sequence, which from my memory is the only time we really heard the Daredevil theme in the original show. Here it's the same theme, it's just reworked by different composers, and it's actually incorporated into the show as we're seeing it. Um, and I was able to listen to the actual like soundtrack of the first half of the show, and there's like one song that really stands out that I'll link here. Um, I haven't had a chance to listen to the second half music yet, but I'm sure it's good. Um, and I don't know if I would say if I have a preference over the Newton brothers who did the music here versus John Paisano who did the music in the original Netflix show as well as the Defenders. Um, but they do honor that original music, so that was cool. There's also new music though for certain characters where they didn't bring it over. Um, but but it was good overall. Uh, I guess I should also mention that there's also licensed music in this show as well, which was not something that we saw before in the Netflix series, which is also some one thing that separates the two. And the licensed music I think was really good. What they used and when they used it was really good. Um, but that's all I'll say about that. The next section I'm going to talk about is the cinematography, which in my opinion was great in only like a couple of episodes. And those episodes being episode one, the premiere, and then episode eight, which are also some of the best episodes of the show. And maybe the cinematography is one of the reasons why they're the best. But I don't think it's my primary reason for thinking so. But they are huge aspects, and because of the cinematography, those two episodes stand out more than the rest. And there's some standout moments in episode three, I would say, and then the finale, but they're not as good as one and eight, in my opinion. And then for the rest of the episodes, the cinematography, I think, just does the job. It doesn't stand out, but it's also not bad. Um, so that's how I'll describe that. The next section I'm going to talk about is the lighting, which I think this might be the first time I've ever spoken on lighting in a review, but it was very kind of prevalent to me in Daredevil Born Again, and I think intentionally so. It was very bright, which, like I said, isn't I think intentional for the show. I think to kind of create a certain feeling um, that kind of ties maybe to some of the themes of the season. But in terms of just the way that it looked, I wasn't a fan of the lighting. I think it was too bright for me. It just is kind of ugly. Whereas before in the Netflix series, we had a lot of like kind of warmer tones overall, and it's just like prettier to look at. And it kind of added a little bit to the grittiness too of Hell's Kitchen in that show. Whereas here, I think maybe we get a better sense of New York as it actually is in real life, but the Netflix show was a little bit more stylized, and that kind of came through with the colors. I think that's probably the best way I could describe it. And it's kind of the comparison of The Dark Knight and Christopher Nolan's version of Batman versus Matt Reeves' The Batman. I would compare it like that. So The Dark Knight is like this show in terms of the look of it, and then The Batman is like the original Netflix show. And I prefer both the Batman and the original Netflix show in terms of the look. So that's my opinion on that. Um, Now I'll give my overall score out of 10 for the season. Then I'm gonna go into my ranking of the episodes and then the spoilers. So I would give this season an 8.5 out of 10 because I did enjoy it overall. Sometimes very much, but there was one episode in particular that I actually was like, what the fuck, this shit is ass. And that was episode 7. So that episode alone probably brought this down a lot. Like maybe I might have given it a 9. Maybe not a 9, but an 8.75 at least. but that one episode brought it down to an 8.5. And honestly, it could possibly be lower than that, but because I did like a lot of things about it, which maybe is just the characters because of my love from the previous show, I just brought that over to this show. I'm gonna give it an 8.5. Now, my favorite episode is episode 3, titled "The Hollow of His Hand." And the reason for that is it impacted me the most emotionally of not only this show but the original Netflix show. Like, I had the most intense kind of like emotional response watching this episode than I've had before. And I have had emotional moments before. I think at least two that I could like specifically recall in the previous show, but none of those two moments quite like matched the level of my response to this one. Um, Number two for me is episode 8, Isle of Joy, which in my opinion did a really good job bridging the two kind of, you could say, versions of the show, the pre-overhaul and post-overhaul ideas, I guess you could say, more so than an overall like an actual show, because it wasn't a full show from scratch. It was just number episode 1, 8, and 9 were basically added, and then the other stuff was just like some small tweaks and like some little thread that they put in the middle to tie everything together. But episode 8 is where everything kind of coalesces, and it does so in like phenomenal ways, which is why I preferred it over the finale, and by a lot. Like, because I like the stuff that the original team did, but I do think it was the right call to bring in some more of those connections from the original Netflix show. So I like the what the new creators did as well. Um, and only time will tell to see like what their vision is, and if it is truly, I guess, better. I mean, we will never know if it's necessarily better because we won't have to compare it like from scratch because they still have to go off of what was already filmed. It wasn't just theirs to begin with. But anyway, that episode was a big standout for me. Three for me is episode 2, Optics, um, which was the character. I mean, the episode that introduced White Tiger. Um, Number 4 for me is Excessive Force, which is episode 6, which is pretty much the main Muse episode. So those are my top four. And then after that is episode 1, titled Heaven's Half Hour. Then the finale, episode 9, titled Straight to Hell. Episode 4, Six Semper Sistema, the episode that had the one scene with Frank Castle. Then episode 5, titled With Interest, which was a bottle episode, which I don't know if you know what that is, but in TV, it's when basically one episode doesn't directly tie in with maybe threads from the rest of the show, and it's like a more self-contained episode where it could kind of be seen on its own without having known any other context, and you could still enjoy it, kind of like a mini movie, like a short film. And episode 5 was cool for that reason, like what it did as a battle episode. But in my opinion, like I'm not really a fan of battle episodes as much as I am of like episodes that more ties in with the rest of the story of a show or of a season, because that's kind of what I'm drawn to. I'm drawn to good stories, and like for a television show, a long form story instead of like a bunch of mini stories, I think is what I prefer. I think mini stories works best for me in cartoons, but in a live action show, I would prefer an overarching story, with like maybe some side quests in an episode or two. But this one was like, you know, pretty much completely almost removed from everything else. and that's the only reason why it's so low. But I really liked it. It was a cool episode. And then my least favorite is episode 7, like I mentioned, which in my opinion is not only the worst episode of this show, Born Again, but also the only bad episode of Daredevil at all. So that kind of sucks that happened. Um, and I'll go into it maybe a little bit more in the spoiler section, which I'm gonna go to now. I'm gonna go back to a lot of the characters and talk about the spoiler stuff that happens with them as I do this. You're only gonna have 5 seconds, because I think you might have had plenty of time by now to leave if you don't want spoilers. All right, so in episode 1, the reason why Foggy's not in this show a lot and pretty much at all is because he dies in not only the first episode, but the first fucking 15 minutes of the show, which I was expecting him to die, but I wasn't expecting him to die as soon as he did in the show. I thought maybe the end of episode 1 and like pushing it, but maybe even in episode 2. But no, this motherfucker is gone as soon as we had him back. So that shit was crazy. Um, my initial like thoughts or feelings about that was like holy shit, like what the fuck? One, they actually did it, and two, why the fuck did they do it so soon? Like I really wish, and I do still I think feel like this and stand by this statement that they should have extended it a little bit more and had Foggy and Matt do one case together in Born Again so that we could really fully feel that, and it might have actually helped maybe new viewers who hadn't ever seen the previous show but maybe started this one kind of care about Foggy dying, because even I, who had seen all this story with Foggy, I didn't really feel his death when it happened. Like I didn't feel sad. So I kind of didn't like that because you I should feel sad because Foggy's like a main character, and in my opinion he grew so much from season 1 to season 3 of the show. Like I actually didn't like Foggy. I think I liked him in season 1, but then when he found out that, spoilers for the original Daredevil show season 1, when Foggy finds out that Matt is Daredevil, I stopped liking Foggy. I was like, shut the fuck up, Foggy. Like, why are you crying so much about this? Like, I know, like, I can't really speak for what I would be feeling in that situation because I'm not, and it's not a real. I mean, it could be something that is a real experience to be had, but I probably won't have that experience in my real life, so I can't really speak to like would I be behaving or feeling the same way as Foggy. But as a viewer of the show, I was like Foggy, like really, are you really gonna be like this? I just felt like he was doing too much, and and in season 2 he had a little bit of growth. But I think I didn't like really start liking him until Defenders, which is when he fully kind of accepts Matt being Daredevil, and he's like kind of okay with it. Like, all right, I know you have to do this, so I'm just gonna let you do it. I'm not gonna like try to force you to not do it or hold you back from it. Just be careful. And then in season 3, even though Matt does him dirty, he still has that kind of more positive outlook on everything when it comes to that relationship with Matt. So I really liked all that stuff, and I liked Foggy by then. But when he dies, I don't feel that sad for him. But luckily, I did feel it later in the show. That's what I'm gonna talk about next. Episode 3 is when it hit me. Um, and that's why this was the most emotional episode of the show, because it's a lot of things in this episode that for me is when it starts to kind of coalesce, or like you know, like it's kind of simmering before that, but then that's kind of when it starts to hit. In season and episode three, I mean, and four, I think are the two, but episode three was a little bit more powerful for me than episode four was, and and it's first because of Foggy's death, where in that episode Matt is it's the Hector of I mean the trial of Hector Ayala. So Matt's representing him, and he wins the case, but at the end he's like celebrating with his new girlfriend Heather, the therapist that he's dating, and it's the first time he brings up Foggy because he says that him and Foggy used to celebrate. I believe, I guess, since they started Nelson Murdock and Page, because I don't think this was ever a plot point in the original show, but maybe in the last however many years it's been. I don't know from the top of my head. They've been opening up a bottle of O'Melvinies, I think whiskey, and drinking that whenever they win a case. So it's their way of celebrating. So he pulls out a bottle of that because he won the Hector Ayala case, and that's when he brings up Foggy to her for the first time. And she's like, I wondered when you were gonna bring him up, and he's like, yeah, it's hard. And you could tell he doesn't like really like want to talk about it too much because I think when he does, it brings up those memories and it just makes him like feel sad. Um, but instead of kind of dealing with the death fully, he kind of basically like puts everything in that past life away so that he doesn't have to face it in this series, and that's why he's focuses on the lawyer side. And I guess another thing from episode one is after Bullseye kills Foggy is when we see the fight between Daredevil and Bullseye. But that fight ends in another kind of shocking moment where Daredevil just fucking pushes his ass off of the roof of Josie's building, um, hoping to kill him. But somehow, fucking Bullseye doesn't die and he survives, which maybe was a gift from God, maybe a fucking curse. Who knows? But the way that I see it is it was a gift that where God kind of saved Matt from crossing that mortal sin, um, and maybe becoming something that he had been fighting against his whole life. So that's kind of the other reason why he focuses on his lawyer stuff because Foggy, even though he had accepted him as Daredevil, he still didn't enjoy Matt doing that because anytime that he goes out, he could die, and that was just his fear every time, and up until his death. So he's like, I didn't want to give you an excuse for basically suiting up. Before, so that's literally the last thing Foggy says to Matt, and then Matt fails to save him. So he kind of feels like he owes Foggy that focusing on justice through the law rather than being a vigilante as Daredevil. And I think that's the other reason why he focuses on being a lawyer and he kind of throws Daredevil in the closet. And he's scared that if he goes back out, he's gonna kill somebody because he just has this like hate in his heart from this like rage, this anger for Foggy's death and the way that it happened. So I really liked that aspect of the storyline, but it was like under the surface, so that's why it's like it's kind of drawn out in a way, and that's why, in my opinion, overall it wasn't as interesting as past seasons. But in the beginning, like that scene in episode one, like that shit was fucking powerful, and that shit I think is like a masterpiece. The way that they did it. Um, so so there was that. when he's telling Heather about it. That's like when it first started to hit me. I don't know if I let out one tear at that point. I don't remember anymore. But then, since we started following Hector in episode 2, and I was already like into his character, invested into his story in that episode. In episode 3, we really delve into his trial and everything that led to it. At the end, he gets fucking killed, shot in the fucking head, point blank, by a motherfucking cop in a fucking Punisher outfit. And just out of nowhere, like from 1 second to the next, he's here, he's boom, he's fucking gone. And like I was not expecting that. Like I think I might have heard about him, his character, Hector Ayala's character from the comics, and that he does die in the comics. But I wasn't expecting that in the same way I wasn't expecting Foggy to die in the first 15 minutes of episode 1. I wasn't expecting Hector to die like that, and we never got to see any action with him as White Tiger, which is just another kind of like unfortunate thing about the show. And that kind of goes back to the action as well, because I think it would have been really cool. Like I think we should have gotten that. In terms of Hector's story, I'm fine that we didn't, but just as a fan of comic book media, I'm bummed out that we didn't, and it would have been cool to see one fight sequence with Hector. And I was hoping that they would team up Hector and Daredevil, but Matt never makes it that far, or Hector never makes it that far because he dies, and Matt's not Daredevil when Hector's active. So just a action scene with Hector by himself would have been enough, but we didn't really get that. Like there is one where he's like saving a bodega from an armed robbery, but we don't really see it while it's happening. Like we don't see it in like kind of the God perspective that we see like TV shows and movies. It's through like video footage of like a camera in universe. So we don't really get a good look at it, and then we don't get the full fight either. But anyway, when Hector dies, as soon as that shit happened, fucking water falls from my eyes. I was crying like a motherfucker, and it was the hardest I've ever cried in Daredevil, and maybe one of the hardest times I've cried in seeing any media, any film or TV show. Um, Besides from a couple of other comic book adaptations, um, I'd say the one that hit me the hardest was Tony Stark in Avengers Endgame, and then after that, it was probably Logan in the movie Logan, X-Men, Wolverine. Um, but I think Tony Stark cried the hardest, and then White Tiger was actually above Logan, which is crazy because Wolverine is Wolverine. He's like one of my favorite characters in Marvel ever. So the fact that White Tiger was able to have that effect on me, with just 2 episodes to his name is like crazy, and a huge fucking hats off to the actor. Man, I wish he was able to see the reaction to his performance because people fucking love him. It's not just me. Um, and it was like a meaningful role. Like in my opinion, his role as White Tiger is to the same level of importance as Chadwick Boseman as T'Challa Black Panther. And it's funny that they're both like cat themed characters. It's not funny, but an interesting coincidence that both of them died before their final film. Well, actually, I guess T'Challa he wasn't even in Wakanda Forever at all. He never filmed that. Chadwick Boseman, but they both died prematurely from cancer, which is crazy. Crazy coincidence, but It is something that I noticed. It's weird. Maybe it's like a curse, Marvel curse. Hopefully not, but I am, I guess, a superstitious person, so it's something that I did think about. Um, and I never hated Wilson Fisk more than I did, and at the end of that episode, episode three. Um, Episode four is when things started coming to a head from the beginning of the show, and where they kind of started setting up maybe some threads for the later part of the show. Like we got a tease at Muse, but in my opinion, it was kind of like a pointless tease. And that episode for me was like there was just too much going on, where it was like overwhelming to me. But it was when we first get to see Adam, who is somebody that Vanessa cheated with on Wilson Fisk while he was gone. Um, and we find out in this episode that Wilson Fisk has been holding him prisoner in a fucking dungeon that he has. And in the beginning of the show, Kingpin's on a diet because he's trying to like slim down to like look good for his election. So he's like barely eating and he's eating really healthy. But then in this episode, we see that when he goes to his dungeon to visit Adam to have like talks with him, basically to get out his feelings about the situation that he had with Vanessa, he has this fucking huge ass plate of food where it's like a whole fucking feast just for him. And he's like basically it's like his cheat days, his cheat meals. And he eats, and then I think from that episode on, he's like does that, and he eats until he gets fucking big again, because he doesn't really need to keep that like look that he had from when he was running for mayor, because he's mayor already. So he's like, I'm gonna be the kingpin, so I could like build up my strength again. Um, and like even before we see Adam, we kind of guessed that Kingpin has had him or seen him and has been fucking beating the shit out of him because we see his fucking knuckles bruised and shit. But then in this episode, we see Adam. He looks all fucked up, and it seems like maybe Fisk hasn't been feeding him, so he's been starving him, and now he's eating this shit in front of him, in front of this starving man that he's also been beating with his fists. So it's like, damn, like that shit's kind of dark. So that shit was kind of funny. In a dark way, dark humor. Frank Castle, and it's Matt kind of investigating Hector's death on his own, and he finds the shell casing that killed Hector has an engraved Punisher logo on it. So he goes to Frank to see if he knows anything about it. He doesn't suspect that Frank's the one that did it, but like because it's his Punisher, I mean because it's his logo, he thinks like he would at least want to know about it if he doesn't know anything himself about it or like where it came from. But Frank doesn't seem to fucking give a shit about it at all, about cops using his logo. He's just like really like these motherfuckers fucking fanboys. Like he's kind of annoyed by them more than anything, but he doesn't really seem angry about it at all for him to actually act on it. But then he's like he basically deconstructs Matt and his whole emotional state because he could feel the fucking hate in Matt and the anger and his want to fucking commit violence because Matt in this stage in his life is in the same place Frank was when Frank's family died. Because Foggy was Matt's family, even more so than his blood relative, his mother, who we found out about in season three. Because like Foggy, ever since college, like they've been fucking through some shit. So when Foggy's gone, it's like what the fuck does Matt have left? Like that's how he feels at least, and that's why his life kind of goes to shit, and he pushes things away. Um, and that scene, like, fuck, man, John Bernthal and Charlie Cox fucking killed that shit because Frank is like this is about Foggy, and Matt's like, no, that's not about Foggy, but Frank knows, he sees through the bullshit, and he breaks Matt down to the point that Matt like finally releases some tears, which is the first time that we've seen him, because it actually jumps from when Foggy dies to a whole year later. So we don't see the process right after. When he dies and when he throws Bullseye off the roof, he takes his cowl off and he does cry. But um, we don't ever see him cry again until he speaks with Frank now. And it might be the first time Matt has seen Frank since Daredevil season 2. It might not have been. It's not really clear. It could be either or. But either way, like the fact that Frank has that experience, and they have shared like personal moments or intimate moments with each other, like shows that Frank is kind of an important character in Matt's life, whether Matt wants it or not, or wants to believe that or not, because he was able to do that. Um, and I think it helped Matt a little bit kind of deal with some of that more than he had before. And we see him later on, like more and more kind of getting to a bit of a healthier state, possibly. Um, I mean, sometimes it's kind of like more of a bump, and then he's like a little bit better. But I think overall, it's good to process those emotions when you lose somebody and you're grieving instead of to kind of bury them. Um, so yeah, so that scene was really good. The emotion behind it didn't hit me, but I think it's mostly just because I had already let out my tears in episode 3. But if I hadn't, I think I would have cried in that episode. Um, and it's still, I think, like I said, the best scene in Born Again. Um, episode one's bullseye fight, I would say it was probably the best fight in the show, best action. The Muse fight in episode 6 was also pretty cool, but for me, it was undercut by it cutting between that and Mayor Fisk beating the shit out of Adam, which he finally does that we see in episode 6. Um, and that's kind of where Matt and Fisk's kind of arcs are mirrored, even there, because episode 6 is when Matt Murdock suits up finally for the first time again as Daredevil since episode 1 a year ago. Um, but that 1 year ago fight with Bullseye, I think it was better. Um, and then another action sequence that I liked with the fighting is at the end of episode 2, where Matt faces the crooked cops, including Powell, for the first time. And the only reason why he fought then is because they were just gonna fucking kill him, as they were planning to do to Matt's witness for Hector's case in episode 3. Um, because he was the only person that like witnessed what actually happened, because they were blaming Hector for killing well, Powell was blaming Hector for killing his partner, but he actually just like tripped into the train platform, and literally like he didn't even get to the floor. He got hit by the train just in during the fall, which is crazy. But that guy is the only other witness. So yeah, but that fight was cool. when Matt goes and kind of gets that witness out of there, and then stays to speak with the police. And I actually like that scene. I think maybe more than even the finale scene where Daredevil teams up with Punisher. Um, Maybe not more than episode six. I think it would be episode one, Bullseye fight, then episode six, Muse fight, and then episode two against the Dirty Cops. Um, and then there's like a couple of other fights. And the bank in episode five, the bottle episode. Um, Episode seven, there's another Muse fight where Muse actually dies. Not by Daredevil, but by Heather's hand, because she shoots him with the gun that he brought, I think. Uh, I also didn't like the fact that he even had a gun, because Muse doesn't seem like somebody who would be a gun owner. He seemed like a knife person. Um, and like people who use knives could also use guns, but he seemed like somebody who would just not use a gun to me. So even have him having a gun kind of threw me off a little bit in episode seven. But um, I'll get back to that episode in a bit. First, I'm gonna before then I'm gonna mention episode eight, which for me I think was the most tense, and episode three was really tense as well. There was a lot of tension built up there before the ending when Hector dies. But episode eight was probably the most tense, and I think perfectly weaved those storylines like I mentioned before. Um, and it ended on a huge cliffhanger where Matt gets injured in a big way when he jumps in front of a bullet for Fisk, which was crazy. Um, Episode six is the only good episode with Muse, and I like that episode overall. I like Muse in it. But after that is episode seven, which I think just ruined Muse's character because they make him like I think Muse would have been cooler if we never got a backstory for him, if we didn't know who the fuck he was, like Joker. But they give him a backstory, like an origin story kind of, and it just makes him seem a lot less threatening. And he just seemed like a little bitch, a little pussy ass bitch who's just salty about something. So I didn't like that, but I guess they might have the creators might have wanted to do that so that people don't like aren't like inspired by Muse. But I think that kind of does a disservice to the fans. Like the fans, it makes the creators seem like they think the fans are not that smart, that they would like literally admire Muse and like be inspired maybe to do anything that maybe he would do. Not to those extents, obviously, but just at all in general. Um, so it is just not a good look, in my opinion, if that is the reasoning. Um, because I think even bad characters could be cool. Doesn't mean that we like are aspiring to be like them. It just means that we enjoy watching them. But I didn't enjoy Muse in episode seven. Him outside of the mask seemed kind of goofy to me. Like he wasn't as scary. Like I didn't buy into the fear as much in that episode when he's not in the mask. His name is Bastion Cooper. We find out, and then like he kind of complains about his taekwondo coach, and he's also rich, which like makes him like just this spoiled rich kid who didn't like stuff that he did have in his life, and it just makes him kind of pathetic. So I didn't like them going that route with him. It would have been cooler and scarier, I think, if we didn't know anything about him. And I might talk a little bit more about that later. And then for me, the finale, episode 9, I think just did its job bridging season 1 and season 2 of Born Again, but I didn't like it nearly as much as episode 8, or some of the best other episodes of the season. Um, Probably the craziest part about the finale was Fisk fucking smashing Gallo's head, dislodging his jaw with his bare hands. And that shit is honestly the most traumatizing shit I've ever seen in a TV show. And I know, like, my sister said that she's seen worse shit than that, but I haven't seen everything she's seen. So for me, that shit was like fucking insane. And I didn't have nightmares about it, but literally the next day, after watching that episode, the first thing that popped in my mind was that fucking image. So that shit did a number on me. I think by now I'm like desensitized to it, where like I'm okay, but every time I see it, it's still gonna be gross. Um, but yeah, I guess I'll go now back to some of those characters that I was talking about. And since I'm talking about episode 9, I'm gonna talk about the Frank Castle shit, the Punisher. The reason why I felt like Punisher felt different to me in this episode from anytime we saw him before Disney Plus is that he was going so fucking hard on the anti task force, which, yes, I agree they are bad people, but at the end, in the finale, it seemed like Fisk was getting just all cops to kind of get on board and on duty patrolling the streets. So I don't know necessarily if those cops that he was killing when he went to Red Hook are necessarily all just straight up bad cops. In the apartment, in Matt's apartment, yes, I do think all of them were bad. So yes, they maybe deserve what Frank was giving them. But the ones in Red Hook, like, does he know? Like, does Frank know, or he just doesn't give a fuck anymore? Because before he had a code, like he wouldn't kill nobody who was innocent. Um, he would only kill people that he found guilty, whether they were criminals, which was his main target, and then some government agents who fucked him over, fucked his family over, and got them killed. Um, but in this case, it seemed like he doesn't even know who he's killing. So like I didn't believe he would actually kill them. One in general, or and then two, like he was just fucking over killing them. Like he fucking already knocked the fucking teeth out of this one dude, shot him once in the head, but then he kept shooting him in the fucking head until fucking Cole Norris shot Punisher. So I was like, damn, like what the fuck, Frank? You really gotta do all that? And I feel like before he only did what he had to do. He didn't do more. So I was like, yo, what the fuck? Did Frank lose somebody else recently or what? What the fuck's going on with him? And that's the thing that we don't get to really see in this season. Because we see him in episode 4 and we see he's got this wall of like a bunch of pictures of people where he's obviously has targets, but we don't know who the fuck those targets are. And at first I was thinking maybe they are some of the task force, but it seems like maybe they're not by the end of it. Um, and my kind of guess is that we'll find out what he was doing instead of like helping Daredevil or caring about the cops using his logo in his special. He's gonna get a Marvel Studios special presentation, which is like a short film for Disney Plus, and that's supposed to come out next year. They say. We'll see. I don't know. Um, my assumption and what I think makes the most sense is that that's gonna cover what he was doing while Daredevil was over here in Born Again season 1, and then we see that he gets captured by the task force in the finale. But then in the post credit scene, he escapes. So then I suspect him to return in season two and to actually like continue on from there. But we'll see. Some people think the special is just gonna be in between season one and season two of Born Again, and then yes, maybe he will still be in season two, but I don't know. We'll see. Like I said, Angela Del Toro, after the death of her uncle, she kind of wants to finish what he started, where we find out that he was investigating the missing people that had gone missing due to Muse's activity. Um, and he doesn't know who Muse was. White Tiger didn't know who Muse was. He just was like looking into it because nobody else was. And we find out, like obviously the police didn't know until this motherfucker has 60 bodies, that 60 fucking victims that he killed. So she goes and she's fucking dumb and doesn't put on the amulet that was supposed to give White Tiger powers. And we also don't get to see what the fuck those powers are because they seem kind of useless since he just died at like nothing. He have no fucking spider sense or nothing like that, no reflexes. See that coming or hear anything. Um, so that was kind of dumb. And then she gets taken by Muse herself because of that. And then that's what brings Matt out because he finds out, and the police are not gonna get there in time, so he has to suit up as Daredevil. So I like that shit. That shit was really cool. But after that, Angela didn't really get anything else to do. I think we just see her in the hospital in episode 7, but then we don't see her again until the very end of the finale, and it's just like literally a shot of her. But in the comics, she's supposed to become the second White Tiger, so I suspect that she'll take the place of White Tiger and actually suit up in season 2 of Born Again. And honestly, it would be cool if she got a special presentation because I could see that happening where she kind of has her own little origin story where she's doing stuff on her own, doing some more vigilante stuff now that she's healed at the end or by the end of season 1 of Born Again. And then in season 2, she could actually join Matt or join Daredevil because she doesn't know Daredevil's Matt Murdock. But she could join Daredevil, and then that would be cool. But they're not gonna do that because they don't have time for that. Um, but honestly, I think I might have preferred that actually over a Punisher special. But I am curious to see what that Punisher special is gonna be. And either way, I'm down to see it because I do like the Punisher. And I like John Bernthal's version. Detective Cherry could have just been Mahoney from the original Netflix show, who was an NYPD officer, and it would have been so much better, and it would have tied into Foggy's storyline as well because Mahoney was like pretty much mostly Foggy's like kind of contact or friend, more so than he was Matt's, and he could have like quit the police force after Bullseye kills Foggy because Bullseye, when he does that, also kills a bunch of innocent civilians and possibly some other police officers because it seems like at this point in time, when Born Again starts in 2026, um, there's a lot of cops that go to Josie's bar. So Bullseye might have also killed another cop or two there, and that could have just been like I'm through with this shit for Mahoney, and he could have quit and then gone like private, become a private investigator, which is what Cherry does for Matt. and we would have had that connection already, and it would have tied to Foggy, and we could have seen some more stuff happen there. Because I do wish we got to see like Foggy's funeral and just some more of that aftermath of his death. Because there was a lot of characters that were Foggy related characters where they didn't even have any direct connection with Matt Murdock, and I think Foggy deserves to have like his part of that, of his own death. Have something happen with those characters that loved him. And honestly, that in my opinion could have been its own show. Just Matt dealing with that for that whole year. That whole year of him not being Daredevil could have been its own show. I mean, maybe some people might be upset that there's no Daredevil at all. Like here, we barely got any, but there was still some, and when it was there, it was pretty cool. So that's possibly why they didn't do that. But in my opinion, it could be, and it could be really good television. Seeing Marcy, his girlfriend, who he might have proposed to by now. Um, Foggy's parents could have come back. His brother from season 3, like all of that. That would have been nice to see, but we just didn't get to see that. And Mahoney's just so much like more charismatic, like to watch on screen. He's like way more lively than Cherry. Like Cherry's so fucking one note. Um, and I don't know if it's the actor's fault. I think it's probably the writing, but either way, you know, I feel the same way about Cherry just being Mahoney. As I do think that Cole North could have just been Officer Powell in season 1. And I'm pretty sure Officer Powell was an original character for this show. So I don't know why the fuck they created him if Cole North existed and they were using him. Because then it just makes it seem like they're just racist and they didn't want to give a role to a black dude, so they had this white dude have this bigger role than Cole North, but basically doing the same shit. And Officer Powell was actually like more of an antagonist than Cole North was, even though Cole North was the one who fucking killed Hector, meaning I should hate him. But anytime we actually see Cole North, his face, it actually doesn't seem that bad. So there's kind of like a disconnect there too between that character and his actions. So, but then he fucking seemingly dies in the finale. So then he's also like another wasted character in season 1 of Born Again, just like fucking Muse. Um, so I was like bummed out by that too. But maybe there's a chance he survived. Like maybe he was the one who fucking pulled the pin on that grenade and like tossed it there, and he was just willing to risk his life to take out those other vigilantes. But maybe before it exploded, like they ran out of the building and jumped out. He was able to like leave the apartment, like get to the hallway, and like the only wounds that he had, I believe, were two in his hands, and then just getting knocked out. I don't think he was injured in any other way, so he could have survived that, and we didn't see him die. So I'm kind of hoping maybe Cole North is alive and he comes back in season 2, and that's more possible than Muse. But they said Muse is also coming back, so I'm like, I don't know how that's gonna happen because it really seemed like he's dead too. But North makes more sense to come back. We'll just have to wait and see. But overall, I guess I kind of don't really care about Cole North. But Officer Powell, I do, like I said before, hate or love to hate him. So I want to see him lose. Cole North, if he's alive, I hope they do something interesting with him because Right now, they didn't do him justice. I'm gonna tell you some of my theories that I had both while the show was happening and which know either was true or could still be true, as well as like maybe one that I have just now after the finale going into season two. First one is that Powell and his partner in episode two knew that Hector was White Tiger the whole time, and they were baiting him by staging an attack on their informant, Nikki Torres, who was the witness. Um, and that's why Nikki was willing to lie in court. And they had been working together. We find out from Matt, excuse me, for years. And it seemed like because Officer Powell is part of this like kind of Punisher cult within the NYPD, that they would go after people that they see as like bad, and maybe that does include vigilantes, which is why they kind of backed Fisk, because Fisk's whole thing as mayor is that he was going to clean the streets of vigilantes. And honestly, they didn't really give a good reason for that, because we didn't actually ever see any vigilantes in this show do anything bad. So I don't know why the people would have elected him if that was his main kind of thing running on. But there are reasons that we've seen in the past, like the Battle of New York in Avengers. We saw some of the aftermath of that in the Jessica Jones show, where some people like hated heroes, and I think they attacked Jessica for having powers for that reason, even though she wasn't involved with that at all. And then obviously the Sokovia Accords were another thing. Um, but in this show itself, and even in Daredevil in general, we never saw vigilantes be looked at in a negative light. So I feel like that was something that they probably should have done. But either way, it seems like Powell probably is against them, because he's a as a police officer, vigilantes are like criminals. So even in a world where there's like superheroes and these crazy things happening all the time, where we they kind of need people like them, they probably still are against them. Um, so I think their plan originally was probably just to capture and imprison Hector, but when shit went bad, they're like, nah, fuck him. And Powell knows that his fucking partner wasn't pushed by Hector, but he blames Hector for pushing him off, and it makes all the other cops, it riles them up, and it makes them hate them, which is the only reason why Cole North would have killed Hector, just because he thinks Hector killed a cop, and he's a cop, so he backs his own people, and it's just like him enacting his own justice. But that's why you don't do shit like that, because you don't just go off of what fucking somebody else says, even if they're your friend. If you don't know for a fucking fact, don't fucking kill somebody over something. Don't even beat them up for it. I mean, depending on what it is, but especially like if you're a police officer, you shouldn't do that, because that's not what you do. You gotta go through due process, and fucking Hector did go through due process, and he was found not guilty, and he wasn't guilty. That was the fucking truth. So I should hate Cole North, but then afterward he seemed like an okay dude. So I don't know. I don't know what to feel about him. Um, Another theory that I have is that Daniel Blake is actually Detective Blake's son from season one of Daredevil. He was another dirty cop who was working for Fisk in that season. And the only reason why I think that they're related is because of that name that they share, but also because Daniel seemingly is looking for like a positive male role model, somebody to look up to, and he looks up to Fisk. So he kind of sees Fisk in this like kind of father role. and that's probably because his father's dead because Detective Blake died in season one, which I hope, if that is the case, if that's the intent behind it, that Daniel finds out about that and he teams up with BB Urich, whose uncle was also killed by Fisk. Because for Blake, it was his own partner who finished him off, but Fisk originally staged an attack to frame Daredevil on Blake because he also was fucking up. And then when he was in the hospital, he sent his own partner to finish the job with an injection, which was the same way that Buck was gonna kill Matt in the finale, which is crazy. Um, but yeah, I think that would be a really cool kind of twist in there. And I actually haven't seen anybody else bring that up, but I really hope that is true, and I am continuing to still believe that that is the case. My third theory is only if Muse comes back, and the only reason why I think he might come back is because they said he's gonna be in season two, and it doesn't really count if it's just flashbacks from season one. So I'm sure they're gonna film like new scenes, and I guess they could just fill in some stuff like with some of his older victims, but I don't see what the fucking point of that would be. So if Muse comes back, my theory is that one, he'll have powers, and his powers are related to sight, sensory information, because that's his powers in the comics. I don't know exactly what they do, but for the show version, if they bring him back and he has powers, I think he takes his victim's eyes because whatever his power is, it helps him to like create his art. Like it might kind of unlock new ways of seeing the world for him, which makes him more expressive. And the more eyes he collects, the greater like sense of perception that he attains, which just enhances his ability in the arts. And I think he just uses their blood just because he's insane. But I don't think he needs their blood if he does have this power. He just needs their eyes, and then their blood he just uses because he kills them when he takes their eyeballs, and he's like, I might as well use them. And yeah, but Muse was like kind of a vigilante, or he seemed like he was gonna be maybe a vigilante at first because some of his artwork was political, and he was like, specifically targeting like Fisk and stuff like that. And he seemed to actually like admire White Tiger because he made a mural about him in a positive light. But then he ends up like, just killing these random people, and I don't think he knows who the fuck they were. I'm pretty sure they were just random people that he found. So I guess for Muse, there's like this darkness where he just enjoys killing, and he just doesn't give a fuck who it is. Like he's kind of like a vampire in that way because he wants blood, and he doesn't care where it's from. But he uses it to create his art. So that's one theory I have about Muse. Another theory I have about Muse is that if he does come back and he's alive, I think that maybe it'll not be the same Muse, Bastion Cooper, who put on that mask and died in that mask in season one. I believe that maybe Bastion Cooper wasn't Muse to begin with, and that kid was kind of just sent at the end by the real Muse, using him to kind of take the blame for his murders. And maybe it could be like a cult type situation where maybe Muse has like a cult following, and Bastion Cooper was just like a fan of his, and he was like, "All right, I'll do this for you." And maybe Bastion Cooper was the real Muse of Muse, or the Muse of the real Muse. I guess it's kind of confusing when you use that word twice. But if this theory is the case, then I think he'll show himself in season two to possess those powers and to maybe even have an inhuman appearance, where he doesn't even look human. He looks like a monster, with no childhood, no background ties whatsoever. And if he does come back, I want his art to actually mean something because I thought Muse was gonna be saying something, but it seemed like in episode seven, which was titled "Art for Art's Sake," that Muse's art was just him like kind of wanting to be an artist, but him not really being focused in his like statement what he wanted to say because he kind of seemed like all over the place. Like he was like talking about guns on the streets, talking about corruption, stocks, and like some of the art. It was like showing like arrows kind of going up and down, which maybe were about stocks, money, but it wasn't really like a clear vision. So I think because that shit might have been Bastion. You know, like Bastion was doing all this shit, but he was inspired by somebody else who was the real Muse. Um, but honestly, I don't care at this point if Muse doesn't come back. Those are just if he does, and that's if the creators want to use him. I hope they do something cool with him. Whereas season one, in my opinion, just fucked them over. Um, my last theory is that Vanessa is the one that moved Bullseye into general population, hoping that he'd get killed because he knows that another theory that Foggy is still alive and he's being held hostage by Vanessa. And the only reason why I think Foggy could still be alive, I personally don't want him to be alive, but there is this comic book in the storyline in the comics where Foggy fakes his death and Vanessa's related to it. And there was also an Easter egg to that comic book in the first episode, which is the episode that Foggy dies in. But by the finale, I was like it seemed like nah, Foggy's gone because he didn't show up in the finale. Like that was the time to bring him back. But honestly, if he does come back, I like that it'll be not in season one and in season two, because by then we would have experienced the loss of Foggy, like not having Foggy for the same amount of time that Matt did, because it would have been a year for us, like it's been a year for Matt and Karen for that matter. Um, and the only reason why I think Bullseye might know anything about that is because he said he has questions in episode 8 of like what happened. But then in episode 9, it seemed like everything was laid on the table for him before he took the job and was freed from whatever mental institution he was in. So I'm like, what the fuck other questions does he have? But I think he knows something else was at play, and he's like he just wants to know the details about it, and that's the only thing I could think of. So I still don't know if I want Foggy back, but I'll be happy when he does come back if that is what they're gonna do. Um, so that's all I'm gonna say for my review. Now the rest of this video is gonna be things that I want to see in season two. First thing, the Defenders reunion with Luke Cage, Jessica Jones, Iron Fist, Colleen Wing, and Misty Knight, as well as with added members Echo, Maya Lopez. I don't know if they're gonna do that because currently, with the way that things are looking, which I kind of hate, and the Echo series, they took Maya out of New York and they put her in her hometown of Oklahoma. Um, I don't know if it's Tahoe or something else. No, it's something else. Oklahoma. I forgot what it was called. Her hometown. But New York is like shut down. It's under martial law at the end of Daredevil season two. So I don't know how Echo would get back into the city if she was there in her hometown still, which it seemed like she was by the end of that show. So maybe she won't be in it, which kind of sucks because I would have liked to see her. team up with Daredevil. But Punisher, I think, should join the team and like interact with everybody. Cause so far he's only interacted with Daredevil when it comes to other like big characters. Swordsman was another character in season 1 of Born Again, as well as in the Hawkeye series, where he was involved with Eleanor Bishop, who was in business with Fisk. But here, I think was the first time they actually met each other. But Swordsman also didn't really get shit to do in this season, so I hope he comes back and is freed because he was also captured and in that kind of prison that Fisk had at the end of the finale. Um, and we didn't get to see him do any like swordsmaning in this season except for again in a fucking video, like a phone video, like we saw with White Tiger. Um, so that would be cool. And then with Angela Del Toro coming as a White Tiger to cap off the team, and maybe Hellcat, Trish Walker, Jessica's friend, because after the Defenders, the last time we saw her with everybody else, Trish was like okay, but then since then she's gone through her own journey and she's like became a vigilante briefly, but then at the end of whatever season that was of Jessica Jones, she got locked up in the raft. But if Fisk and Bullseye are both out by now, there's no reason to believe that Trish wouldn't be as well. So she maybe could have gone clean and continued her vigilante career, but doing it right this time instead of being, I think, lethal or just super brutal and violent, which is what I think she was doing. And Jessica Jones, I don't really remember that storyline very well, but she is a character in the comics and a heroic character in the comics, so I would be down to see Hellcat and actually her getting an actual costume too this time. But again, I don't know if that's gonna happen, and I think that's probably the least likely, even less so than Echo. But I'm open to it, so if it happens, that'd be cool. So, like I said, with the return of Muse with a more fleshed out story, good visual effects of Daredevil's abilities. Oh, I guess that could have been another section as well. The visual effects in Daredevil Born Again, there is some, whereas in the Netflix show it was all practical stunts. Here there is some like CGI, but there's like barely any. Like there's only like a few moments of it, like literally maybe exactly three. Um, one in the premiere, and then I think just one in episode 6. Um, but there's like a couple different moments in the fight scene in episode 1 with Bullseye where it was like jarring, like you could tell that it was CGI, and one part it was like unnecessarily CGI. Like I think they might have done the scene practically, and then they also had a CGI double, but just for some reason in the editing they like used the CGI part seemingly, in my opinion, for no reason. So it kind of took away from it a little bit because you're like not focused on the fight and the drama and the action of what's happening. You're like, oh, why does it look like that? Like it looks fake. So I just hope that that shit is all fucking crisp as fuck in season 2, and and they show more of Matt's like acrobatic abilities and shit. Because I think in the She-Hulk show when we first saw him really be moving like that, I think it looked good. I think it looked perfect. Like there was no, in my opinion, noticeable CGI with it. I think they did a good job with the CGI for him in that show. So I just want it to be back to that level. Um, so here's hoping to that. I also want actual turmoil for Matt because I feel like in this season he actually didn't go through as much as I was expecting him to from the trailer. Because in the trailer it seemed like he was like fucking going through it, like in season three, which was like the craziest season for him. Um, but things were actually kind of calm for him until until the end. I mean, obviously the beginning was probably the worst moment, but then in the actual like present day of the show, like he was fine, and like nobody else got like too injured or anything that he cares about. So so it was fine. So I hope some actual shit goes down in season two. Like I said, I hope that Daniel finds out about Fisk having his father killed, if that is what they are intending, and that he teams up with BB after he realizes that to face Fisk, take him down. And if that does happen, my prediction is that Daniel would kind of rise up in the ranks and maybe still be a bit of a shady politician, but just against Fisk. Um, I want Bullseye to get his proper comic accurate costume. I would like to see Matt's mom, Maggie, from season three, and just more of his faith in general. And I think there is room for that in season two. If Foggy does appear in season two, I would rather him not return alive, but more as Matt's kind of angel on the shoulder, the way that they did his father in season three, and then Fisk as the devil on his shoulder in season three. And I don't know if he needs to necessarily have both. I mean, it could just be Fisk again, but I don't know if it really makes sense for them to do that because in season three it was right after he had like kind of come back from dying or like being half dead that he was seeing Fisk like that. But I don't know if if we were supposed to interpret him as actually like seeing him, like having um hallucinations of that. I think it was just like physical representation for the audience to see like what he's thinking to get in his head. But they could still use Foggy in a similar way. Um, and then the last thing that I like really would like to see is ending the season with Luke Cage taking over as the new mayor of New York City after they bring Fisk down from his term. There's a couple of other stuff that I would like to see. I had mentioned previously that Cherry could have just been Mahoney, but obviously since he's not, he's a new character and he's obviously gonna stick around because of the ending where he's joining Matt's army to kind of take back the city. They could have Mahoney still come in now as somebody else who joins in, especially if Foggy does um, return alive, and maybe Mahoney could have even been the one who has Foggy in witness protection or be involved in some way. Because I think witness protection is always a federal thing, and Mahoney wouldn't be a federal agent, but maybe he could be involved in some way. Like he might know about it. Um, I think that could be cool. Uh, I want Kirsten's character to be better developed and for her to get some good lawyer scenes. I don't know if we're gonna see much of the lawyer stuff in season two, but like Matt is definitely, I don't think he could go back to that, but maybe Kirsten would could still and like do some of that stuff. And if that does happen, I hope she gets some good stuff to show her chops. Um, I also would like to see a Heather redemption arc because where she went in the end, I would say in episode 8 after Muse tried to kill her, she kind of just went quickly downhill for me. Like I really liked Heather up until then, But then she's like, you know what? Daredevil didn't save me. I saved myself. But she's dumb because she would have died if Daredevil wasn't there. And she doesn't know what the fuck is going on. And both times that Matt suited up as Daredevil, he did it for to save other people, and he was trying to not be Daredevil. So I don't know what the fuck she was talking about. Like him doing it for himself. Like that's just her projecting, I think. Because how the fuck would she even know that? So honestly, I blame the new creators for that turn in Heather because she never seemed dumb like that before. So I think the show in its current state might have like a women problem, like a problem with women, which is unfortunate. And I hope that's not the case. And I hope whatever they do with all the female characters in season two does justice to those characters and is respectful, obviously, in every way that it can be and should be, you know. But the only reason why I say that is because no female character has gotten a poster for Born Again season one, and at the very least, Vanessa should have gotten one, considering, like I said, she's the primary antagonist of the season, and characters with less episodes have gotten posters, but they're literally all male. So I don't know what's up with that, but hopefully they figure it out and they fix that shit for season two. And whatever Heather's doing, I just hope like she doesn't stay on Fisk's side. I don't know if she'll ever get back with Matt. I don't really see that happening anymore. I don't think there's no turning back. But I just hope that her character is redeemed in some way. The last two things that I would really like to see, but I don't necessarily need them, and I don't know if they'll happen, is a Punisher Bullseye confrontation, because those two going off against each other would be fucking phenomenal. And then two, a Punisher Kingpin reunion, or I guess rematch is a better word for it. Because in season two, they had like a brief little scuffle within the prison, and Punisher said when Kingpin was letting him out, like, all right, this is what it is, but the next time I see you, I'm gonna fucking kill you. And Fisk was like, yeah, I'd have it no other way. Same thing for him, pretty much. So that would be a cool rematch. And I don't know if I want that because that would mean probably one of them's gonna die, unless they just both fuck each other up so much, but then both survive, because that's just what they do. Like we've seen fucking Frank get into so many situations and like barely survive. It could be one of those again, which I guess that would be the best way to go about it. But at least making that attempt and just going all out on both sides, that would be crazy, and that would be really cool to see. Um, so I think that's gonna end my my review, my thoughts on Daredevil Born Again. What did you all think? How does it compare for you to the previous show? For me, my ranking of the seasons of Daredevil are season three, peak, fucking masterpiece, beginning to end. Season one, which was really good for my taste up until the finale. The finale was still like pretty good, but it wasn't as good as the rest of it in my opinion. And then season two, which Punisher stuff was really good. The Elektra stuff I think was also really good. The hand stuff, which is tied with Elektra, not so good. Um, so that season was just like the less or the least kind of cohesive, but it's still better than Born Again season one in my opinion because of the good stuff in it and how much of it we get. Because I would say the one thing about Born Again that is like definitely easily inferior to the Netflix show is that we just don't get enough time with some shit. Like Muse, fucking one episode gone, dead. White Tiger, one episode he suited up, dead before we even get to see him do anything. Fucking who else? Fucking Foggy, fucking 2 minutes, boom, dead. Like yo, what the fuck? And we didn't even get to feel Foggy's death really. Like we didn't get to live with that shit. So the original show would have never done that. So I'm hoping maybe in season two, because we're getting a little bit closer to those, like that type of, or like kind of wanting to be like those original Netflix seasons. I'm hoping we just get the time to let everything breathe. Cause episode seven I think was pre-overhaul, and some of these episodes were a little bit shorter than like an hour length, which is what every episode pretty much of the Netflix show was. And it was also 13 episodes, whereas here there was only nine, and there was a couple episodes that were like kind of short. I think this was still the longest Disney Plus Marvel show though so far, so that's still a good sign. Um, but yeah, let me know what's your favorite Daredevil season. You can also, if you're a comic book reader, put some comics down below, some comic book recommendations. I already have some from Marvel themselves, so I might check those out at some point before season two. But thank you for watching. I'll catch you next time, and peace. Um, all right, so now when it comes to um, spoilers, for BB, um, the whole thing I was talking about with the whole city angle, how I think maybe it could come into a bigger play in the second season is that the second season is gonna be like kind of the revolution against Mayor Kingpin, which is what he becomes in the finale. And directors of the first and last two episodes of this season are going to be coming back for next season as well, and they compared it to like the French Revolution, so things might get like as bloody and violent as that, but as like kind of hopefully triumphant in the end. And I think the people are gonna start kind of coming in and helping Daredevil and whatever else vigilantes join the rebellion. And I think that'll be something that would be cool to see. So I'm excited for that. And then now some spoilers for some of the themes that I mentioned are in episode 8. We see Mayor Fisk finally kind of start getting what like donors for his Red Hook kind of plan for redevelopment, and he has dirt on like everybody, so he's able to kind of blackmail them into donating money because he needs not only the public funds but also private investments. And then we see that happen again in the finale with Daniel blackmailing the council members who have been doing their own kind of illegal activity regarding money, um, forcing their hand and like going along with Fisk's plan because they don't agree with it, so they wouldn't have backed him themselves, but because he has this against them, they do. And the same thing applies to Commissioner Gallo as well, because Gallo only joins Fisk's like group, I guess, his kind of main people of communication, his main line of communication regarding the city, because Fisk found out that he has a child out of wedlock who he's like, he goes and visits sometimes, and Fisk blackmails him with that information when Gallo threatens to quit, leaving a huge hole in the police force. But because of that, Gallo continues to work for him, even though he doesn't want to. Um, and obviously that doesn't turn out good for Gallo. Gallo should have just kind of came out with it and got in front of it, so that he wouldn't have to worry about that blackmail anymore and still quit. Maybe he would have came out of the show alive. Um, and then the last thing that I want to mention, when I was talking about all of the defenders and stuff, I would also like to see Spider-Man play into it at some point. He's supposed to be getting his fourth movie next year, I think. I'm pretty sure it's next year. Spider-Man Brand New Day. And I stand by what I said in my No Way Home video on things I would like to see in his next trilogy. And I want these two to team up. And Mayor Fisk could even bring in some Spider-Man villains like Scorpion to kind of combat the vigilante threat, and makes like certain bad guys who were previously seen as bad or criminals into like good guys, taking down the vigilantes who he's painting in a bad light now. And I think it would be another good opportunity for MCU Spider-Man to introduce Prowler officially, like in the Prowler suit, who could also be working for Kingpin, similar to kind of how Prowler did in the Spider-Verse movie, Into the Spider-Verse. Um, so I think that would be a good avenue to go, where some of this story plays into that movie. But the showrunner of Daredevil Born Again said that the second season's supposed to come out around the same time as the first season did, which is in March, which would be before Spider-Man. So if they are able to do something like that, the timeline of it might be a little bit weird, because Daredevil Born Again would kind of wrap up before the Spider-Man movie. So either they'll have to wait to kind of conclude that storyline in a movie, or they Spider-Man will have to take place somehow before the end of Born Again season 2, and that would just be kind of weird to see things in that order. So I don't know what they're gonna do with it. I hope they find a way that makes sense, that is gonna connect the two, because Spider-Man's obviously a huge hero in New York. So Mayor Fisk's kind of rule now in tyranny will affect Spider-Man, and he also even mentioned Spider-Man in episode 2 of season 1. So that kind of has to happen, and in my opinion, it has to happen now in Spider-Man 4, not waiting until later. So we'll see what happens, but I hope it comes to fruition.